we can talk about how, like, leading up the days leading up to the crash.
Yeah.
How did things transpire up to that crash, which was a pretty traumatic event for you? I understand that. And how were the emotions, and like what were was going through your head when the crash did happen as well?
Yeah. So maybe I'd preface it with this, Jacob. First of all, in terms of, there are many people who volunteer for things that do, a lot more than just than what I did as being involved with the presidency. So I certainly do value though and recognize the importance of volunteerism. So that's something I would always urge people to do. Get involved in your community. You cannot have this world turn without volunteers. There's just no way. Nothing will ever work without a volunteer. And so those people, and there's so many who do so much, really deserve so much credit. But yeah, just leading up to the crash, of course, we were in the playoffs, and there's a tremendous story that I know even Caleb Dahlgren put in his book a little bit about it. That story that I had shared regarding a matter that happened with my billet, one of my billet sons, Connor Lucan, and of course Connor passed away. But I just wanted to share with you the story about it because it just kind of is so inspirational in so many ways, and keeps, I think about that night when they were playing in Melfort, and there were two penalties actually. It was a 5-on-3, and Connor was on the ice, and Logan Boulay actually, and tomorrow of course is Green Shirt Day, and Logan was in one of the people in the penalty box, and his dad told me about this part of it, which I thought was pretty powerful. But I was watching online. I didn't go to Melfort that night, and I was watching online, and I saw, we're shorthanded, we're up in the game, but it's really tight, and we got to kill off these penalties. And Connor's on the ice, and he ended up blocking a shot, and then he blocked another shot, and then he blocked a third shot, and that one caught him in sort of the ankle. And all of a sudden I see him drop, and I'm thinking, oh no, here we go. He was certainly, one of our senior vets, an incredible player, had won an AJHL championship. He had all the pieces that you need in leadership and all that sort of thing. He's an incredible man, like young man, like all of them were. And anyway, then he got back up though, and he you could see he was hobbled pretty good, and he ended up blocking, I think, 2 more shots after that. Wow. If you can believe it.
What a beast.
Yeah.
What a beast.
It was incredible. And he finally, they got the puck down the ice, and he got off the ice, and Logan, I guess, skated over afterward, after he got out of the box, and he went up, and he said, and he gave Connor a big hug, or from behind kind of idea. And of course he couldn't see any of that, and that's just what Toby was telling me, and he said, "Thanks, Con man," or something like that, and Connor said, "Hey, you do it for me, man." Like, that was just kind of the nature of team that existed with that organization, with those kids, and certainly with our leader Darcy Hogan. So that was kind of when he got home after that. I'd waited up, of course, as I pretty much always did. And and then I said, "Hey, great game, man," like that sort of thing. "But how's your ankle?" I asked him, and he said that, it hurt, kind of thing. But when he got to the box, he knew that if he sort of didn't, do something, then his ankle was going to swell up and he wouldn't be able to skate. So he bent down and he tightened his skate, which was sort of the mantra then that we kind of operated under, right? That as things were tough for so many people, 29 families, and in a lot of ways the whole world, it was just really about just tightening our skates when we needed to. There are lots of times when your ankle wanted to swell up, but you just did what you had to do. So that was kind of the nature of how we operated then as a community, how families operated in those extremely difficult times, certainly, and certainly how I did as well, and our board. We just had to tighten our skates, do what we needed to do, make sure we could get back on the ice and keep things moving. So after that, of course, we won that series against Melfort, and then we ended up playing Nipawin, and we were down 2-1 against Nipawin, playing on Wednesday night, and we were up in a game fairly significantly, and they battled back as they always did, and it ended up going to overtime, and then double overtime, and then triple overtime, and we ended up losing that game in triple overtime. So it was a real tough loss, of course, and but we really, and it was kind of, just the way it was. Nobody really felt like we were out of it. We knew we were in a good place to win that game, and we felt like we could go to Nipawin and beat them there, like we had done already. And so, that was kind of the nature of where we were at as an organization. Certainly where Darcy was at and where the kids were at and that sort of thing. We were, in a place where we felt like we could move on. And as it turned out, of course, I was also dealing with a personal matter. Had a nephew of mine who was in ICU in Edmonton. He'd been struggling with mental health, as I know we all do at times. And so Thursday, I'd let Connor know that we had to leave town, and I remember saying to him something like, "We're not done yet," and he basically said, "We're not done yet" as well. And we even texted things like that as well. But then I had to take off to Edmonton on Thursday, so to go be with my nephew, and that's when I was in Edmonton in the ICU with my nephew when I got the phone call from one of our board members, Kathleen Keene, who contacted me and said, "Kevin," it was a little bit before 5:00, I remember, and she just said, "Kevin, have you heard anything about a bus accident with our Broncos?" And I said, "No." And I thought I would hear something, like as a president of the organization. And she said, "Well, I just heard there was an accident." And I said, "Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know." So I tried making some phone calls to people on the bus, that sort of thing. And couldn't get a hold of anybody. And I just thought, well, that's not unusual. Like Darcy would probably have them put their phones away or whatever the case might be, and, focus on the game. It was only, a couple hours before the game. And never could get a hold of anybody. So then I something just came over me, and I just thought, like, something's not quite right. And I made some other phone calls, first of all, within our organization, and talked to our assistant general manager, Jason Neville. He hadn't heard anything at that point. And again, this was still probably just a little before 5:00 or just right around 5. So then it was shortly after that I finally reached out. I ended up contacting the president of the Nipawin Hawks. And that's when he told me that there'd been a terrible accident, and that it was bad, real bad is how he sort of explained it or expressed it. And so at that point, you're trying to figure out what's gone on, or have people passed away? You didn't know anything. And then that's when all the information, of course, started flooding in, and you started hearing about the fact that we'd lost some of our Bronco family members. So anyway, so my brother and my mom and dad and everyone were with my nephew. And so I just let him know that I had to go back to Humboldt, and they understood. So we left and went back to Humboldt. And so that was kind of what sort of led up to my getting back then. And then, of course, we began the next day in trying to support in the best way we could the families around a number of different things. Getting into the hospital as soon as we could to go and see our, the Broncos who were still alive, and at that time we had lots who were, and or some, like Dana was still alive, and of course Logan had lived after the accident, and then he was an organ donor, and we all know that story. So, and how impactful that's been, and there are others as well. But anyway, so that kind of was the start of, the certainly the worst day, I think, in so many people's lives, certainly in my life as well, as we then had to try and put together the pieces that of the organization. But at the same time, that was the last thing we were really thinking about. The big thing was just trying to make sure that we could help the families and do whatever we possibly could in support of them. Lots of billet families were hurting. Of course, there were other challenges that had occurred, and that families had to deal with. And that was even things like misidentification and things like that are hard on everyone that way. Certainly on those two families that were most closely impacted, obviously. So think about them on this day, and very much, and think about every person who has been impacted as a result of this tragedy.